Federal Drive is presented by GEHA, Government Employees Health Association, proudly providing health and dental benefits to federal employees and their families. Visit GEHA.com.
The Pentagon wants to scale back its test and evaluation office just as threats are growing more complex. Experts warn that cutting this unit could reduce battlefield readiness and leave troops exposed to unproven technologies. Here to explain what's at stake and why Congress is paying attention is the director of the Center for Defense Information at the Project on Government Oversight, Greg Williams. Mr. Williams, thanks for joining me.
It's my pleasure.
Before we get into what's new, let's refresh our memory on what DOT&E is, how it was established, and what role it currently plays.
Sure. So in 1983, Congress established by law the Office of the Director of Operational Test and Evaluation, and they did so in the wake of a series of scandals around weapon systems that didn't perform as expected. Probably among the most famous of which was the M16 rifle, which we now know as the M4, a rifle that evolved from the M16. And while it eventually became a very successful weapon system, when it was initially issued, it suffered from very frequent jams and misfires. And Congress was confronted with letters from Marines and from their families, telling stories of dead Marines found clutching malfunctioning M16s. And so the Office of the Director of Testing and Evaluation was established not to conduct tests, but to oversee their planning and their evaluation, to provide an assessment that was independent of the services that were seeking to acquire these weapons, and to make sure that those assessments were sent directly to Congress as well as to the Secretary of Defense. And so that way there would be some oversight on what kinds of testing would be adequate to assess whether a weapon system was ready for combat, and then an independent evaluation of the results available to Congress and the Secretary of Defense.
So it sounds like a fairly technical mission, but it doesn't operate in a vacuum. It has to collaborate with the service's own testing organizations. Is that correct?
That's exactly right. Those are the organizations that are typically conducting this testing.
As you said, Congress gave DOT&E a specific mandate to provide this independent assessment and to report directly to Congress. Secretary Hegseth has proposed some pretty radical cuts to the organization. How would that change its mission from its statutory requirement?
So the Secretary of Defense can't change a statute. So the statutory requirements of their mission have not changed and cannot be changed by the Secretary of Defense. And so DOT&E remains responsible for providing that realistic, operational, meaning as though it were actually being used in combat, of these new weapon systems. And they're required to evaluate all of what are called major defense acquisition programs, ones that are above a certain cost threshold, as well as any additional weapons identified by the Secretary of Defense or the Director of Operational Test and Evaluation. So none of that has changed. None of that can change according to law.
The Secretary's proposed cuts, a reduction in staff by 70% and a budget by nearly 80%. What would this mean then for the organization's ability to meet its statutory obligations?
So presumably it would be diminished. Now, what is interesting is that while Hegseth has claimed that 80% savings, that's not reflected in the president's budget request. It's not reflected in the House or the Senate versions of the National Defense Authorization Act. So it's unclear that there will be any reduction in the amount of funding. And while the original memo directed DOT&E to cease using contractors such as the Institute for Defense Analysis, my understanding is that prohibition has since been lifted. And so they will be able to rely on outside contractors to perform a lot of this work. But in terms of the direct employees, they will have to do that with a much smaller number. I guess I'm burying the lead because what we are seeing as of July 31st is a reduction in the number of programs for which they will provide operational test and evaluation, down from 251 to 152.
I'm speaking with Greg Williams. He's the director of the Center for Defense Information at the Project on Government Oversight. Well, let's follow that last thread. Reduction of 100 programs that they'll oversee. Those 100 programs don't go away. So what happens to the operational testing oversight for those?
So it goes away. And just to be clear, it's 99, not quite 100, but still a very large number. And so what happens is that the services that are performing operational tests and evaluation can change their test plans in ways that perhaps might not have been acceptable to DOT&E. And they will then evaluate the results of those tests without any independent oversight. And they will not be required to submit those test results to Congress. And so these weapons programs will proceed, but without any of those kinds of oversight.
That seems to circle us right back to where we started and why DOT&E was created, was Congress didn't necessarily trust the services to be objective about the programs they were advocating for. Does that present new risks to service members?
That seems to me to turn back the clock and reinstate risks that the office was intended to eliminate or to mitigate.
Well, you've raised specific concerns about programs like the XM7 rifle being dropped from oversight. Tell us more about why that is concerning to you.
Well, it's both ironic and concerning. The XM7 is the first wholly new infantry rifle system that the military has introduced since the M16. And like the M16, it changes the way the rifle operates. It changes the caliber of ammunition that it uses. And it has already started to experience some problems in testing as identified by DOT&E. So for us to be moving forward with the first brand new rifle we've seen since the 1960s, with that kind of oversight, seems to put our soldiers unnecessarily at great risk.
That particular program, as you said, not only is a new weapon system, but also a new caliber of ammunition. Does DOT&E have oversight over the ammunition production process and making sure that ammunition is safe to use?
Yes, is the short answer. And they will continue to provide what's referred to as live fire testing. But without a more comprehensive operational test and oversight of those operational tests, it's hard to assess whether or not the rifle system as a whole will be better than what it replaces. It's important to understand that the new ammunition is substantially larger in diameter than the old one. And the idea behind it is that they will be able to hit more often and more often be effective on the first hit. And that depends on a great many different things. It depends on the rifle operating successfully and not suffering breakdowns. It depends on the soldiers have an easier time hitting, which in turn involves testing the very complex sighting system that's used with this rifle that's never been standard issue on a United States or, as far as I know, any military's infantry rifle system. So there are broad changes that will need to be made in our tactics and in our logistics system in order to effectively deploy and employ these rifles. And without that kind of, taking a step back and assessing the overall operational concept of the weapon system, it will be hard for us to tell whether or not it's a good choice.
Are there any other systems that will now not be subject to DOT&E oversight that raise concerns for you?
I am concerned about the advanced arresting system. This is essentially the wire and all of the springs and things that provide resistance when a naval jet lands on an aircraft carrier. The Forward Carrier program has experienced significant difficulties with that system over the years. And so for them to drop operational testing oversight for that program is deeply concerning. I'm concerned about the latest variant of the Sidewinder air-to-air missile, the AIM-9X, for which they've dropped operational testing, and many other weapon systems. There are a number of torpedo systems. Somewhat ironically, the Fleet Oiler that Hegseth recently renamed, the Harvey Milk, that class of ships is no longer on the oversight list. So, and we could go through them one by one, all 99, but that would take some time.
Well, how are members of Congress responding to this proposed cut? This was one of their programs that they specifically initiated, the DOT&E program. At the proposal to reduce it by such a significant number, are they responding to that? The NDAA's on the Hill, might we see something there?
Well, as I said, I did find it reassuring that the NDAA, both, at least the House version, offers some additional protections and clear definition of the authorities of the DOT&E, and it preserves the prior level of funding.
I've been speaking with Greg Williams. He's director of the Center of Defense Information at the Project on Government Oversight. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you.
We'll post this interview at federalnewsnetwork.com/Federal Drive. Listen to the Federal Drive on your schedule and on your device. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.